Dun, dun, dun. Everyone's hated career kits.
Scams.
Which,
here.
Yeah. Very not good look. Although, the interesting thing that came up literally just before we were supposed to get started was, let's see, where is it in the news? At...
You mean the mission featurette thing that they did with
Well, no, I've got the feed thing in my Star Citizen news channel in my Discord, and at 2:05 p.m. it showed a whole bunch of stuff being deleted, including all of these career kits. So I've had this tab open since earlier today, and I screenshotted this just in case. So I don't, but they never came back up. So I don't know if they were legit deleted or what. But that's interesting to see. So when these career kits dropped for sale, there was a lot of people, myself included, who were very critical about this move because it seemed like another in a series of moves where the CIG marketing team made decisions and did things without a sanity check from the community team, who would have told them that, hey, we don't have a way for you to get your gear back in game if you lose it due to a bug or if it's looted. And so you can buy these career kits right now, and if you die in game and your body glitches out and falls into the planet, you can't get them back. If you die in game and somebody loots your gear, loots your body, and you go back and you find just your skin and bones, you can't get them back. And you paid real life money for them. So that's a really bad look. And a lot of people excused it and said, well, you can just melt it and buy it back. The problem is these were marketed to new players, new people coming into the game who don't know about that. And using the melt rebuy thing just creates a whole bunch of extra transactions that clogs up the website's backend. And it's also a workaround. You shouldn't have to do a workaround to get things back that you paid real life money for. That's my take on it, and I'm not going to budge from it because it's a really bad take. This is it's bad enough that they've been doing this for years with buying weapons and armor. The worst part is when you market it to brand new people who don't know the ins and outs of all of these things. And this is something that Nazeris and I talked about. Let's see, did I? We'll move this tab over. So Nazeris and I did it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that my opinion is that it wouldn't be a problem if you just, died in real life when you died in the game. If Chris Rockwards would just send Pinkertons to your house, take care of you like Blizzard.
Trunk Monkey or something.
Buy the wrong parts.
Yeah. I don't mind. I think that this kind of gear or subscriber gear should be looted because it gives people, a way to obtain it without paying real life money for it. To obtain exclusive items, it also makes people more protective of them and makes people make better decisions. But it's fine if it's lootable, if you can just do an insurance claim on it like you can a ship, and it pops back up in your inventory over time.
I think they should just be transmogs.
Transmogs?
Yeah, like in WoW, it just skins for things.
Just
make anything like anything else, and
that's a different conversation entirely, because I totally agree that the way that they've gone about the cosmetic system is not the right way, and it's another thing that Salty Mike and I agree about. But this is what they've done, and I don't know if they're going to change it. This is what we have for now. But it's this feeds into the conversation of, is Star Citizen niche? Because right now, much of the focus of Star Citizen and the gameplay, and for a long time, has been on the ships and vehicle game, vehicle gameplay, but really ship-based gameplay. And it's interesting that they went about this. It's the cart before the horse, because we need a way to retrieve these things, get back, be able to claim them, and they show up in a locker over in a certain period of time. Obviously, you don't want it to be rapid because then people will just dupe things. But, be able to, hey, claim it, and then, Space Amazon sends a new one, and it shows up in a locker, and you're able to retrieve it, at the station that you claim it at. That's fine. But they're really, this shows that there's kind of a change in direction in how they're marketing things for sales, not necessarily away from ships, but in addition to ships, because of the focus on FPS gameplay. And whereas space games and really spaceship games are very niche, that is a niche market. What is not niche is FPS gameplay, and not just combat, but anything. There's FPS games to do all sorts of stuff, and there's lots of different niches that are involved in the first person, not FPS, but first person gameplay that are represented in lots of other different games that are played by many, 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 many millions of gamers. And this is why I'm like, okay, this is them starting to, I feel like CIG is starting to expand into being less niche. And I was already thinking about these when these came out, and thinking about this line of thinking, and then I saw these videos. They were posted. I saw them posted on Twitter from a content creator that I follow named Ark, but yeah, we'll watch those here in just a second. But this plays into the future funding model of Star Citizen that Nazeris and I talked about back here, and I'm going to share this link in the chat, because I think it's important, and in order for people to understand where CIG is going with how they're going to fund the company. Because right now, they're on a trajectory where they will not be able to sustain themselves on ship sales alone. Because every year we have fewer and fewer people who are, we get more and more backers, but fewer and fewer of them are willing to pay for very expensive multi-$100 ships. And we see this
less and less of them per year.
Yeah, and we're getting less and less of them per year. But what people are willing to buy is microtransactions. People are willing to part with $1 here, 50 cents there, a couple of dollars here for things that are cosmetics or gear, things that are, you can collect for decoration. People throw money for that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things we talked about as part of the future funding model. Because CIG really needs to diversify in order to fund the growth of the development of the company. Because we recently learned about the acquisition of Turbulent, and now they're at 1,100 people for the company. The growth that they have planned, that they have announced for Manchester alone, if you do the math, on top of what they have right now, means that their goal for the end of 2026, which I don't think they're going to hit, but they'll make good progress on it, is they're aiming for an entire dev studio, among the different studios, of 1,800 to 2,000 people. That is a very expensive company. We're talking about annual operating costs of over $200 million easily. We're not going to be able to do that on ship sales alone. Even if we continue to get more backers, it's not a sustainable funding model, especially if you have a bad sales year on ships and you're not able to sustain that level of production, all of a sudden you're really deeply in the hole because you have such a massive expenditure. So they need to diversify. And part of that is selling multiple, the different episodes of Squadron 42. It's why they plan to be able to make them in 2 to 3 years at a time following the first one. But another part of it is utilizing PES in order to be able to sell things that are cheaply made, because you can hire tons of brand new artists straight out of university in order to make props for your HABs, for your ship, for your hangars, for your outposts, to make armor and weapons and skins for ships. Those are things that can be mass produced by cheap labor from new grads at the rapid rate that they can sell for a little bit here and there, that consumer psychology says people will eat up, but that's another thing. So, but in order to make a lot of money off of things that are cheap to produce that people will buy. Rather than spending hundreds of dollars on chips, they'll spend a few dollars here and there. You need a larger player base. Well, in order to have a larger player base, a larger concurrent player base, you need to have a product that is less niche. And right now, Star Citizen is pretty niche, largely because it's unfinished and because it's in an alpha and there's lots of bugs and stability issues and there's a lot of content that isn't there, but also because the focus has been on ships for so long and ship-based gameplay. But we just looked at a bunch of things on the progress tracker and via Shiny Tracker of a whole bunch of work for things that is not related to ship gameplay, where the only involvement in regards to ships is as a mode of transport to get to a point of interest to interact with first-person gameplay. And so I saw these videos and I thought they were really interesting because I was not expecting these takes from these content creators regarding Star Citizen. So the first video, and here's the name of the content creator. They go by Arc. I don't know if they're on Twitch, but here's their YouTube. I'm going to share the link to the video. And so I encourage you to, watch the video on your own time. Please go and give them the credit they're due by, because they put in the effort they paid money to ask Dr. Disrespect this question. So
are you allowed to
go and give them their, I don't know.
Yeah, you just got banned, dude.
Yeah. And I don't know why he got banned. I never paid attention to it. I don't like the guy. He's not the kind of content creator I would ever watch. But you have to recognize that he's one of the most...
Their own community.
Yeah, don't
shove
do
them
that.
down their throat and then don't actually deliver anything you promised. What?
He's a gamer, bro, and I can't stand that.
He's also a developer. Like, I forgot totally about his developer background.
Yeah, so he understands game development, and that's why this is important. But I'm going to share this link to this video, so please go watch this Arc's video. It's only 2.5 minutes, and give him a like, because I think that we got to give credit where credit's due, and I like to support other content creators. So there's this one first. So let's watch this.
Yo, how's it going? Quick one from me. Yo, how's it going? Quick one from me. Something cool happened last night. I managed to break through the super chat storm during Dr. Disrespect's Snapshot 6 of Dead Drop, his game, and get some of the doc's thoughts on the game we all love and love to hate. Yeah, you guessed it, Star Citizen. Doc's answer led me to think that perhaps, just perhaps, he's had a small peek behind the curtain himself, and I really love to sit here and imagine how that went down.
Hey Doc, what are your thoughts on Star Citizen, says Arc with a 666. Listen, I know the game's been in development for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. And I don't care how long it needs to be in development to really execute the long-term vision, because it is if you really think about it, it's a big vision. And it's starting to kind of I feel like it's finally starting to kind of come through, in terms of the mass scale of what this thing could eventually be, even from 10 years from now.
Hydrates.
I guess it just kind of depends at this point. How many devs are on it? What's the budget looking like? And what are those plans? What are those massive long-term plans that are realistic, Not marketing fluff or anything, but are realistic.
I put this out on Twitter last night, and judging by the overwhelming response I got from it, I think people were actually refreshed that the doc demonstrated that he marches separate to the vocal herd on this one. And of course he would. He's a vet in the gaming industry, having worked for Sledgehammer Games on most notably Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, and is working with Midnight Society to push Dead Drop, a promising game I've played and streamed myself. So this was less an answer from the doc and more from the creative behind the Google prototypes. What kind of ship do you think the doc would like best? And do you think we'll ever see Dr. D holding down a future rendition of Jumptown with the Champions Club in tow? Comments go a long way to driving the algorithm for me.
All right, so really interesting take from Dr. Disrespect. And it's like, oh, Dr. Disrespect. Who the hell's that? I've never heard of him. Why should I care? Dr. Disrespect has 4.48 million subscribers on YouTube.
Not on Twitch.
Yeah. He's banned from Twitch. Controversial. He's a very controversial content creator and streamer. And that's partly why he has so many people following him. But if Dr. Disrespect is following Star Citizen and that's his take about the project, when it gets to a state that he's ready to play it, Dr. Disrespect of all people will stream and play Star Citizen and talk about it. He would not if he did not believe that it could be a mainstream thing, because he wouldn't. He wouldn't
Actually,
get into Star
California issues.
Yeah, well, he wouldn't get into a product that wasn't mainstream, that he didn't think people would pay to watch him play and pay to cover. And he's just not ready to do it because it's not mainstream yet, because it's an alpha, because it has lots of bugs and everything. It has a lot of missing features. But he talked about the goals, and he thinks that it's going to be something really, really great, which we all believe, but a lot of people don't because they think that it's niche, but it's not. And here's a game developer
G says, could you imagine the type of players he'd bring, though? We'd be playing COD. Have you not seen anyone actually trying to hold down Ghost Hollow?
Yeah.
It's that group.
Yeah.
And Pyro is an entire system of Ghost Hollow. Like, it's there's space for them.
And we're going to get into more of that, because I think a lot of people miss the context of why, if Star Citizen isn't going to be mainstream like Fortnite is mainstream, like Call of Duty is mainstream. It will become more mainstream and less niche. It's not going to get, because when Nazeris and I talked about the future funding model, we did compare, the kings of microtransactions, which are Warzone, which are Fortnite, and those have like literally 100+ million players and make $1 billion plus $2 billion plus a year. Yeah, niche. But Star Citizen doesn't need to have 100 million players a year. Star Citizen doesn't need to make billions of dollars. Star Citizen needs to make a couple $100 million a year, and can easily do that by being a less niche, more mainstream game. Now, you're not going to attract all those people, but you'll attract enough of them who will be attracted to what people like Dr. Disrespect are interested in playing, and what they demonstrate. Hey, this is what you can do in this game. And when you have an audience that is that many people, that's free advertising for what your game contains. And people will follow Dr. Disrespect to Star Citizen, for better or for worse. But we're going to get into why, even if he brings a lot of people that you don't want to play with, that's fine. That's why Star Citizen's going to be really, really big. Not like big as in a big game, but big as in like vast and broad and
amount
tons
of
of
kilometers
space.
of play space.
Yeah.
Amount of billions of kilometers.
So Ark asked a similar question to Summit 1G. And, may not have heard of Summit 1G. Again, to me, another gamer, bro. I can't watch these content creators. Not my thing. But it's representative of the conversation, and we'll watch this in a second. Well, why do I care about Summit 1G? Summit 1G has 6.2 million followers on Twitch. 6.2 million followers on Twitch. And let's see, is now playing Max Payne 3, doing a speed run of Max Payne 3. Max Payne 3 came out years ago. It is not a new game. It was a popular game, but not wildly popular. He has 10,000 people watching him right now. 10,000 people. That is more than I've ever seen anyone watching Star Citizen at any given time across numerous streamers.
I think the highest I've ever seen, is just getting up to 5,000.
Yeah. Well, I know the
And that
original
was
Max
like-
Payne is really old. Max Payne 3, I don't know how old that is. I remember playing the original way back when.
Was it CitizenCon? No, it wasn't specifically not a CitizenCon that got to 5K. I forget what it was.
Yeah. The speed running community is big. Think of all the things that he could speed run in SC when it's in a more mainstream place. And let's watch the video and see what someone G had to say about Star Citizen. And again, I'm going to drop this one in the chat. Please go give Ark subscribe to him on YouTube. Give him the views and the likes for putting this out, because I think this is good content and it's relevant.
Hey citizens, it's me again. In one of my latest videos, we heard from Dr. Disrespect about his thoughts on the Star Citizen project.
Hey Doc, what are your thoughts on Star Citizen, says Ark with a 666.
And today I tuned in early to catch a Summit 1G stream where we asked him the same question. Summit has played the game before, so it was going to be interesting to see what he thought about the project, coupled with his experience of it. Fantastically, Summit talks about Burks and also another mystery Star Citizen streamer he doesn't mention by name, but he does describe that someone having long black hair and a hat. I have a sneaking suspicion I know who that could be, but why don't you tell me who you think that could be down in the comments below? Let's roll the clip.
Summon, any thoughts on Star Citizen project lately? I don't really have a thought on it. That's kind of always a game that I'm looking forward to eventually spending a lot of time in. A guy named Burks that I talked to and played with back in the maybe a couple years ago or something like that was kind of like reassuring me that the game will get to a playable state eventually, with some updates where they had some lag issues and yada yada yada. There's some pretty detrimental bugs to that game, to its play, but once it gets to a really playable state, I'll be on that bitch. We need some more goals and like things to think about. It's almost like Sea of Thieves without many goals to it. It's more like kind of go out and do your thing, but I'd almost like it to be a little bit more like Sea of Thieves, where it wants to bring people together, wants to put some more points of interest on the map and stuff like that, not have lag and shit, and have some sort of something, you know, that I can sink my teeth into, essentially. Because right now, the way it is, it's like it's so open-ended, you don't really know. There's not really much to do. That makes sense. I didn't feel like there was an incredible amount to do while I was playing it. Like, okay, we can kind of maybe do a bounty thing, right? We hunt down a ship. We can go to the ground. I like doing the ground stuff. I like dropping to the ground and exploring a planet and going into the underground bases. I like that Mass Effect shit. You know what I'm saying? I've never really been good at piloting and stuff, so I don't really only want to do like flying around space and shooting at each other with spacecrafts and stuff. I would also like to, more stuff to do on the ground. Which, don't get me wrong, I haven't played in a while. I don't know if there is better stuff to do, but for the most part, it was like, oh, you can kind of hit these like little underground, on the planet, like bases, right? Like grounded bases and stuff. And it was kind of cool. Like, I'd like them to, do more with that. I don't know. Basically, I'll eventually play it, and I think I will have a good time eventually on it. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of up my alley, but at the same time, missing the mark for me a little bit. If that makes any sense. But yeah, I think it's a like overall pretty cool game. We talking about Marauders? No, we're talking about I don't know why I can't remember the name. Star Citizen. I got it. Yeah, super cool answer. Summit Burks is a really cool creator. Yeah, he was a really good guy, man. He was showing me around, and yeah, man. He'll be my first hit when we go back, basically. Definitely check in with him again. Oh yeah, he's the first hit. Don't you worry. There's another guy that I watched play Star Citizen. He's got like longer black hair.
And we don't need to finish the rest of it, but there's a few things that he mentioned, and yeah, obviously he's not the most articulate guy in the room, but so he talked about he said there wasn't a lot of direction, wasn't a lot of goals, he didn't know what he was doing, and so he's like, you do some bounty missions, blah blah blah, and probably played several years ago. what did we just talk about a whole lot during the Roadmap Roundup? Missions. The mission feature team is going nuts.
I think also on top of
making new
that,
missions.
like the problem is we have a lot of stuff, but not a lot of goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
And-
not a lot of progression.
Yeah, and that's where the reputation side comes in, but not even reputation. That's where hopefully sometime soon we see the resurfacing of the narratives version of the what are they called? Things that just moved to narrative. Mission givers. Because those are like narrative driven missions. And for a lot of people, they don't want to be Joe doing sandbox stuff. They want to have a game with a purpose, with a storyline, A to B, a tailored experience.
Yeah, missions and goals, things that tell you what to do, and you go do them.
Yeah, and like this game has already been laid out to facilitate both.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it isn't just a MMO with a whole bunch of quests that you have to do in order to progress your character through a storyline and everything. It's also a sandbox, and so if you want to do sandbox stuff, there's room for that. But it's an MMO, and you're going to have reputation, and there's lots of missions that you will be able to do. Obviously, lots of missions that they're working on. The other thing that he talked about is he's like, I'm not really into flying, not a good pilot. Master modes. What is simplifying flying? Master modes, by slowing down the combat. And the other thing that is, and a lot of people will say, well, the people will be turned off by the survival mechanics. People will be turned off by the having to maintain your ship. There's a counter to that as well. If you are playing in a small system with lots of infrastructure, you don't have to worry about the survival mechanics. It isn't going to get you. You don't have to worry about maintaining your ship. There's a station every few feet, and you can pay someone to maintain your ship for you. Those things are optional. And master modes, and making ship combat slower does make it much more approachable to the average gamer. But even then, even if you don't want to fly your ship, and that's what I suspect is a lot of these mainstream streamers and the people who follow them want more of the first-person gameplay. They don't want to fly spaceships. They want the first-person gameplay, which is fine. You don't need, and this is something that I like, is I like to fly my dropship and drop people off to go do first-person gameplay. And if he and a whole bunch of people in his crew want to go do bunker missions or whatever, all they need is one pilot. And you don't need a hotshot pilot to go do that stuff. You need somebody who can just get the ship onto the flipping ground. Because you're not doing dogfighting or some complex fleet maneuver. You're just flying up near somewhere, and then you drop everyone on the ground. They run over, and they do the contract. And so not only did we talk about a lot about missions, but we also looked at a whole bunch of development going on with multiple different teams on points of interest. And that's what Star Citizen is lacking, because right now we can only have so many points of interest in the game because of the limits of the server. We had to remove an entire flippin' moon with a moon base on it because the server is getting too full, and we couldn't include Crusader. And they've been essentially cycling in and out points of interest in order to get them tested and optimizing the way they build things, so that way they can add more stations, they can add more points of interest that reuse the same assets, rather than creating things that are bespoke, because that allows them to add more points of interest. But we have all sorts of work on different types of points of interest, both in space and on the ground, where first-person gameplay will occur that is going to cater very heavily to this crowd, to the people who want to do first-person gameplay. I'm one of those people. I'm not a good pilot. I think I'm a pretty decent dropship pilot, but I love to do EVA-type stuff. I'm looking forward to doing EVA to get onto stations to do contracts. I love to land on the planet and go do retrieval missions and find artifacts. I'm looking forward to doing more cave spelunking to find minables and do investigation missions. But there's also going to be lots of combat involved in all these things, and plenty enough for all these people who want to dig into this kind of gameplay. This is why, even though someone said he only has a passing knowledge of Star Citizen, that's fine. When the game gets to a better state, someone's going to let him know, and he's going to check it out, and he's going to start learning about it, and people are going to follow, and they're going to watch, because he sees that there's the potential for something that he'd be interested in, that the mainstream gaming community would also be interested in. And that's free advertising. He's also on YouTube and has, he only has, 729,000 subscribers. Jesus. So we got a few more clips, and then we're going to look at some things, but let's talk about what CIG's actual goals are for this and why this is relevant to the conversation, why this is the direction where they're going. So we're going to watch like a minute of this. And so this is from Star Citizen Live Mission Theory. We were just talking about missions. And we're just talking about all the missions that they're adding, that they're building. But this is from November 15th, 2019. And so I'm going to drop this in the chat with the timestamp. And remember, if you're watching this live on YouTube later, this will be in the show notes as well. And so that's in the description below.
This is our last show before CitizenCon. So, here in Wilmslow, United Kingdom, we are taking questions from the community today about missions, mission features, mission gameplay in the persistent universe. You can submit your questions live in one of two places, either on Spectrum, our communication platform available on robertspaceindustries.com, or on Twitch. We are broadcasting live. If you're watching this later on YouTube, thanks, but you can't participate. Sorry. All right, we also put up a thread earlier this week to start collecting questions ahead of time while the new questions come in throughout the day, so we're going to start with some of those. Those questions also got voted up to see which ones people wanted us to address most. Right off the bat, let's just jump into it. We only got an hour here. Current missions tend to require flying all over the star system, which, while good for keeping people moving and testing, can fatigue the player with long quantum travel durations. What's the philosophy behind having players traveling all over the place for more missions instead of having like a group of missions that keep you within a single planetary system?
Always nervous about philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the philosophy going forward is that we try and keep make enough content to fill a planetary system to keep you there for a good long while. So we're aware, travel times are a big investment and quite dangerous sometimes as well. So what we're going to do is, I take like Crusader, right? It's the first planetary system we built, and I'm sure everyone will be able to see that it's a lot more dense with content than the other planets. We want to get the other planets up to the kind of same parity with Crusader, and beyond, obviously. But,
and just for folks who maybe haven't been with the project since 2.0, Crusader, we're talking about the space around Crusader,
the space,
not the planet, which is
the
still
planet
pending.
and its 3 moons.
Yeah.
You'll notice there are like space stations in there that don't exist elsewhere. They are kind of legacy things, these one-off builds that I'm sure we'll get to later, like how we're going to have abandoned rest stops and things like that. So we'll soon be making huge leaps forward in the content and the locations that we can add to the other systems. I did take a quick look at the kind of ratios of local, let's call them local missions, versus ones where you go to another planet. And if this question is coming from someone who plays a lot of the main content in the game, which is obviously delivery missions and bounty missions.
Okay, so he talks about how they want to add more location or more missions, more contracts, more jobs, more gameplay in order to keep you within a planetary system. So a planetary system is a planet and its moons and the local space around it for a long time. And this is something that Luke Presley reiterated. Chris Roberts has said it before. I just couldn't find that clip. But they have talked about this, where they don't want you constantly crossing the system unless that's your specific gameplay. Like if you're a hauler and you're doing long haul, space trucking, then that's different. But they want to have a high density of mission content, of gameplay in a planetary area to keep you in that area and keep you, working in that area and working for the factions within that area for a long time before you, okay, I've done what I need to, I've maxed out my rep with these, this organization, I want to move on to another organization, or I have a mission that as part of this tree finally takes me out of this given area. Well, in order to have these missions and have a lot of mission content, you also have to have, like you talked about, points of interest. And in order to have lots of points of interest in Star Citizen, you have to have server meshing. Every point of interest creates entities that load up and get loaded up on the server. And so as players spread out, you've got more and more points of interest, and that bogs down the server. And so they have to limit how many points of interest they can put in the game until we have server meshing. And that's why we have seen so much development on the tools to make points of interest and then the different points of interest types in the last couple of years, because they're ramping up in order to be able to produce lots of points of interest in a short period of time in order to fill up Stanton. A lot more full than we have right now, in order for you to have more locations to go to for gameplay. And then the same thing for Pyro. So along those lines, here's another really important quote directly from the Rastar talk during Inside Star Citizen, the Cargo Show, Fall 2022, which was November 3rd. And so I'm going to put this link in the chat as well. Again, it's going to be in the show notes in the description below. But let's listen to what he has to say.
Backers should be caring about the Rastar and all these improvements, because that's the way we will be able to give you, the players, the most dense area we can imagine to keep in line and have all the planets, all the moons filled with POI and things to do on the surface, and maybe later in orbit of these planets and moons. CitizenCon 29.
Okay, little quote right there. So they're going to use Rastar along with the procedural locations tool to have a much higher density of points of interest both on the surface of the planet but also in orbit. And so we know that Rastar is used for the outposts and settlements, both actual and then derelict. And then we know that and now we know that the Rastar tool is being used to do the what are they called on Orison or Crusader? The platforms. And so we also have the procedural locations tool, which is used to do the ship derelicts on the planets. Those are points of interest, as well as caves, the new underground facilities, the space stations, and then probably will be used for the asteroid facilities. So each one of these is a point of interest that will have first-person gameplay. And we already have seen some of it, and we're going to see a whole lot more of it. And with server meshing, they can add lots and lots and lots of different points of interest, and not just the UGS we have now, but 3 different sizes of UGFs and multiple different types of stations and outposts and towns and all that. So you have not only a lot of points of interest for first-person gameplay, but also a lot of variety in these points of interest, and thus a lot of variety in the missions that and game content that is associated with them. And a lot of it's going to be, there's going to be plenty that's combat related, plenty that starts out not combat related and then ends up having some combat in it. But a whole bunch of stuff that will be very attractive to these mainstream gamers. And if you watch the recent Inside Star Citizen where they're prototyping the salvage, the hole munching, he did a really good job of illustrating in this part of the clip, and I'm going to share this with a timestamp in the chat, and it's also going to be in the show notes in the description below. But they showed how when they load up all the landing zones and other things onto the server, how it bogs them down, why server meshing is so important, and why when we get server meshing, this particularly dynamic server meshing, we're not going to have these planetary systems with very few points of interest, with only a handful on each moon, and planet. We're going to have a lot more, dozens more. in each planetary, in each moon, and in the space in between the moons and the planets. So we don't need to watch this clip, but it's right there. And then, so a lot of people, and sorry for the brightness on my screen, say Star Citizen will always be niche because players don't want to deal with long travel times. People want to fast travel. They don't want to deal with the maintenance of their ships, blah, blah, blah. So here is a spreadsheet I did last year, that updated, it showed the changes in the size differences on the ARC star map from what was originally posted to the SC Tools Wikipedia when the star map was first implemented. And so this column right here is the size of the systems on the star map from when I copied every single one down a little over a year ago. And we can see that out of, we know there's going to be like 100 star systems or more. 30 of them, about a full third of the known star systems in game that we have the sizes for, are less than 10 AU. Stanton is 5. And we know that if you're playing within a planetary system, going from Hurston to its moons, your quantum jumps are very short. And so you don't have long travel times. You won't have long travel times in between, in between missions, in between contracts where you're going from one planet to another, or more importantly, if you're just going to be taking multiple contracts, around a moon, going to different points of interest, or in an asteroid belt or an asteroid field, you're going to be having very little travel time. It's when you go between planetary systems or between systems that your travel times get longer. And so for a full third of the known systems in the game that we have sizes for, you have very short travel times. And some of these systems have a lot more planets in them and moons and such than what we have in Stanton. So you have even more locations for first-person content. And then from 10 to 30 AU, we have another 30 systems. So 30 systems are between 10 and 30 AU. The number of systems that we have with known sizes that are above 30 AU is actually very small. This is the niche gameplay. And above 10, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, and jump points, Brennan G says, I hope traversing jump points isn't a 10-second thing. I want that to be an experience. I agree. And I think that certain jump points and jump tunnels will be longer than others. And that's how they make it interesting and more dynamic. And some of them will be more dangerous and longer and such. But that part just isn't fleshed out. But as you can see, the majority of the systems in game are actually relatively small. And yeah, quantum travel isn't balanced or finalized yet, but we know that the majority of the systems are designed around being short travel times. And when you bring in the number of planets and moons, you're going to have a lot of localization, like they talked about, where you're going to be staying within a planetary system for long periods and doing the content within that planetary system, unless you're specifically doing things that are more niche. Like if you want to be a long-haul cargo hauler, that's niche. But, that's your gameplay. That's what you're looking for. But the majority of gamers aren't like that. And so let's look, before we wrap this up, let's look at a few of the things that are well into production right now and have been worked on, that are all the points of interest where we're going to have first-person gameplay, and a lot of it's there's going to be a lot of combat stuff, but a lot of non-combat stuff as well. The first of all is new caves. So we have the way that caves are built is using the procedural locations tool, and then they're just able to add in the different types of caves into that procedural locations tool and build all sorts of different caves. And then you can go down to the cave and do a retrieval mission, and I guarantee you. So do you like Deep Rock Galactic? Lots of people like Deep Rock Galactic. It's a super fun game. It's sold millions of copies. It's made lots and lots of money. It's very popular. Going down into these caves, especially in places like Pyro or other places where there's going to be dangerous fauna, that's going to be like Deep Rock Galactic. You go in there and you have a retrieval mission to find this injured person or this missing person or somebody left some equipment down there and you have to go get it. Well, all right, or maybe even you get a mission to find specific minerals either for someone else or you need these for crafting. And you go down there with you and your crew, and someone flies you down there, and you do the Deep Rock Galactic experience of fighting off whip crabs who are trying to eat your face, and but that's your part of that retrieval mission. And maybe you have to get a certain amount of these cave minables, so you're going to be hitting multiple caves on the same planet that are short distances from each other, short travel times. That's not niche gameplay. That's mainstream right there, because it's Deep Rock Galactic, but Star Citizen. Not dwarves, because all characters are going to be the same height. But at least we'll have beards eventually. Space stations. We have space stations in Stanton right now. We're going to have lots of outlaw stations in Pyro, and there's going to be abandoned stations as well. Lots of room for these interiors of these space stations are absolutely massive, and we only use a small portion of it right now. And they're going to fill up these interiors with lots more rooms and different places to go for all sorts of different gameplay, and all sorts of different missions. But this is another point of interest where you will have mainstream type gameplay going on, as well as niche stuff, but a lot of mainstream going on. Same with those Pyro missions. We know that there's not going to be armistice zones. So where are all these hardcore shooter gamers going to go? They're going to want to go to these Pyro stations and get into shootouts and do a bunch of looter shooter and extraction shooter type stuff, which is going to be in the game. Except for it's a looter shooter built into an MMO. Or an extraction shooter, and the place you have to extract to is where the person in your group is with the ship to get you out of here. Now we've got the UGFs. This is concept art of I think they said a medium, and we're gonna have smalls and we're gonna have larges, and they're all being built using the procedural locations tool. We're gonna have tons of these giant points of interest with tons of gameplay, and whether it's lawful or not, whether it's combat or not. As soon as you land, it just became first-person gameplay. And if you're, maybe you have one thing that we've talked about a lot is hacking. There's going to be a lot of hacking contracts and everything to do like corporate espionage type missions. Well, you're going to have corporate espionage, but you're also going to have corporate mercenary work. Hey, we need you to go disrupt the operations of this underground facility because it's producing this, and this company wants you to stop their production, or they want you to sneak in there and steal information. That is tried and true first-person gameplay that is not niche, that is 100% mainstream. And the only part...
I think I heard them recently refer to the existing UGS as small. They were small when they were built. They were planning on taking that concept and moving forward with it, but because it was basically a CitizenCon project, it was not set up to be continued. Yeah. So after they had time to actually get back around to it, they scrapped the current ones we have, and we're on a whole new set of small, medium, large. So medium, they said, is going to be a little bit smaller than the image we have on screen now, with a single landing pad and a slightly smaller above ground, but the underground will be up to the needs of the facility.
Yeah. And the type and such. But lots of first-person gameplay. Tons. And again, combat or not, but there's going to be plenty of things that are very much mainstream gameplay. And especially if you're going in as a team or doing multiplayer stuff, you have a squad. And with multiple lots of UGFs dotting the planets. Because think about how many we have now, and think about how many we could have with server meshing in a system like Stanton. You have a major manufacturing system like Stanton, or maybe over in Magnus, or places where it's a big industrial base. You're going to have lots of underground facilities where this sort of stuff occurs. And a lot of these systems are they're UE systems, they're small systems, so there's lots of infrastructure, and there's very short jump distances between planets. And so if you've got a planet with multiple moons and lots of UGFs on the planets and on the moons, you've got a huge amount of first-person gameplay, combat or not, within arm's reach. That it makes it no longer niche. How many times drink when Tree says niche, and everybody will be drunk by the end of the show. The derelicts. So the derelict ships, like the Reclaimer, the new one with the 600i and the MSR, right? That's what it was.
Which they completely broke.
Yeah. These are built using the procedural locations tool. And the whole goal is for these things to be largely procedurally generated so they can put tons of them on different planets and moons, and some planets and moons will have more than others that, who knows how the dispersal will work, but we already know how the first person content works for these because we have it with the Reclaimer and with Ghost Hollow, and I always blank on the name for the 600i one.
Whistler's Crypt.
Whistler's Crypt, yeah. Lots of
It's completely
great...
busted though, right? Currently.
Oh, is it really? I haven't even been there yet.
Don't go in this patch. It is a lot of the stuff that you're supposed to be using to traverse, clipping through the ground. You can actually take a ladder into the ground, and then it will shove you out, and it's just you can't even get into the front section.
So look at it from the air. Got it.
Yeah. You can go to like the outposty bits on the outside. Just don't go into the cave.
Mm-hmm.
It's all broken.
And
one of the towers is also swallowed by a rock.
But yeah, they have planned. They talked about, and Nazeris and I did a segment in detail on the procedural locations tool and all the things that they're going to use it to build, and how much work the tool does for them just with clicks of the button. But this is made so that way they will be able to have lots of derelict ships on the ground in various states with gameplay, and we have lots of derelict ships already. That's my favorite mission content, is a derelict in space or a derelict on the ground and going and doing a retrieval or find this dead person or whatever. Concept art of an additional derelict javelin that some UE admiral crashed onto a different planet.
A moon planet.
And then, of course, building interiors. Tons of work going on building interiors, because we have hundreds, if we have dozens, maybe hundreds of buildings just in New Babbage or Lorville or on Orison that are going to have interiors, and ArtCore will have countless. And every single one of them can have a procedurally made building interior that's built in entirely using a rule system that is a haven for first-person content. And whether it's, again, a lot of the mainstream gamers are going to be interested more in combat-related stuff, and there's going to be plenty. But a lot of these, we looked at those missions, like the...
Imagine ArtCorp when you don't have to go to an ArtCorp moon to go get rid of a drug den. Because it's in the city, it's in the building.
Yeah.
Like, you can have all your outpost stuff inside buildings because, especially ArtCorp, because it is such an overgrown city, there are places they can't monitor themselves. They just do not have enough manpower. And somewhere like Microtech is going to be a lot more prim and proper, but, recreational drugs there. But anyway, like, you're going to have to, like, go into these buildings, and whether that's through the bottom or top, go watch the video on how they're designing those. I think we also did a video on them.
Mm-hmm.
And they can build them like traditional dungeons, where you have to go in, you have to clear floor by floor. It gets harder as they go. Maybe there's some, like, squatters up in the top, like, right below, right around the...
and they can mix in stuff, because it'll be...
pads.
Maybe this room won't have any combat in it, and you're searching... And looking for stuff where you have to sneak through this part to then fight through this part, these multi-stage missions, people eat that up. And if you can just daisy chain these sorts of contracts working for ArtCore Security or whoever, hey, we've got, a suspected whatever, drug den or smugglers in this building, this building, this building, and we need you to clear them out, check them out, and bring back this, this, and this. That's a lot of content in a short period of time, and all you have to do is, pick up ship, fly over here, land on pad. Pick up ship, fly over here, land on pad. Pick up ship, fly over here, land on pad.
And once we have building interiors, I think it's pretty obvious that they're trying to get player housing in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It won't be spawn, go to station, go back to a building. It will be spawn in hab, your own hab, go to hangar, go.
Yep.
So, hopefully.
Yeah.
But that seems the direction they want to go. Less taking time for time's sake and more actual reason for movement.
Mm-hmm. And this is all just things that they are building with the procedural locations tool. Things that have received a ton of work recently and are continuing to receive a ton of work. This is the Montreal team and the Sandbox teams just going absolutely ham with the tools that they have built. And then, of course, my favorite, the nebulous asteroid facilities, which are only on the progress tracker, and we had this little glimpse of what might be something like an asteroid facility during the CitizenCon last year. But again, if they use this, could very well just be essentially a UGF, mixed with cave in an asteroid. And we have asteroid belts in tons of systems in Star Citizen, asteroid belts and asteroid fields. And these things are mentioned in the lore on the Galactopedia for systems like Nyx. And think of how much FPS content could be, or first-person content could be in a giant... You've seen, when you get up close to these asteroids, you've seen how big they are. And we know how big the UGFs are going to be. If you can fit a whole UGF or something bigger in here, there's so much room for content, especially with the procedural mission tools and the dynamic mission system. And again, this is just the procedural locations tool. We already talked about Rastar because we had that little clip with the guy with the interesting accent talking about Rastar, but they're using Rastar to build the outposts. And here we are on a planet with really cool, interesting, dynamic locations, and they talked about how they're putting 52 different outposts in Pyro.
Do you think that's concept art for the new salvage yards from earlier?
It could be. I don't know. Tom's salvage yard.
Yeah, but it's like there's all those pieces of ships lying around.
Yep. But again, we saw this kind of first person content demonstrated was CitizenCon 2951, right? 2021, where they did the demo with the multiple ways to get the mission done on Pyro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you have a planet or moon that has literally dozens of outposts like this, both active and derelict, you barely have to go into space, let alone make a long quantum jump, to have tons and tons of content, first-person content, that is super mainstream. And again, we all know that the derelict outposts, again, these are made using Rastar. This is where, this is the first-person content that I do right now. I just did a relic hunt the other week, and love this stuff because you get some combat, you have some traversal stuff, you're searching for things. Eventually, there's going to be scanning, all sorts of looting, and it's, if there's a whole bunch of these littered around, you don't have to go very far, and you get a whole lot of content. You get a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to your playtime, which is a big complaint for a lot of people right now, is they spend so much time getting ready and traveling to where the gameplay is, and that's not the intent. That's not the plan. Lastly, and this is just a picture of an Orison platform, not the ones that they're building right now, but they're using the Rastar tool to build more Orison platforms, which is essentially just like an outpost or a facility or a UGF, but on in Crusader's atmosphere. That's this is all that I have for this scanner anomaly, but I just wanted to have this conversation, and I appreciate Naz and Shiny Hobo your input, and but Star Citizen, supervising, but the Star Citizen is niche right now because it isn't done. It's niche right now because we don't have server meshing to allow us to put lots of points of interest in the game. And it's those points of interest which are the endpoints for many of those missions that are being built. But once we have server meshing,
I think right around the time we start seeing a squadron release, I think we'll have we'll call it a public release of Star Citizen. Because they need the engine debugged enough to run smoothly for Squadron and most of the gameplay. So it's a good time to try and find two parallel areas where we start seeing this Star Citizen side be a lot more bug free. And it would make sense to have a release product to spill over from the Squadron sales than an in-dev, this is just the worst experience or the worst experience than what you were just playing. But don't worry, it'll get better. But if they had a release product and saying, hey, we're going to continue developing this side of it while you guys wait on your episode 2, you can come play Star Citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, that's
I think it'll be a much better space and much more mainstream.
Yeah, it's only going to get more mainstream as the game gets more fleshed out. And there's going to be a lot of things within the game that aren't mainstream. Mining is not mainstream. Long distance, cargo hauling in general, but long distance cargo hauling is not mainstream. Salvaging isn't mainstream. But each one of those things is a niche in its own, and as you add more niches up, suddenly you have a product that it stops being niche because it satisfies a whole lot of game desires that people have.
Yeah,
you couple that on top
Minecraft
with the stuff that
is not a niche game. Playing creative is a niche part of Minecraft. Most people play mini games on servers. That is that was what most people do most of the time. So mini games, alternative games, we'll call them, so longer form like prisons or something like that, factions, survival, creative. Those are all niches within Minecraft. Star Citizen has the wonderful ability to capture complete game genres within their one game. So not only do we have vehicles, FPS, which we've been talking about a lot, we have racing games or racing sims, we have Euro Truck, we have farming, fishing, the list goes on and on and on of what other genres that will be in Star Citizen. So Star Citizen, I would expect to get to a point where Star Citizen is not niche, but it will have several niches within it.
Yeah, lots of niches within it, and then the first-person gameplay, particularly the combat, is not niche at all. It's definitely niche if you want to go to Null and do your first-person combat there in a system with 120 AU and very little infrastructure. It's not niche to do that in the majority of the game that is planned.
And what were you saying, Hobo?
I just said to concur. I think that there's a lot of different things you'll be able to do in Star Citizen, and it'll become the least niche game because it has every game. Then I guess then it becomes niche because it has so much stuff, but it's like super niche.
Super niche.
Right?
Mega niche.
It's the superset of all gameplay becomes niche. Itself.
They're building a game that contains the most mini games within it of any game ever.
Yeah, that's pretty niche.
Yeah, that is a unique thing.
How I understand it is the definition says, or interest appeals to a small specialized section of the population. So you can't really have a game that's you can't be niche in the larger sense is what I'm trying to get at least to my definition. If it's different because it's the biggest, that's not niche. It's the opposite of niche.
It's not a small. It stops being a small niche. It's
becomes uber niche.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is late, especially for Nazeris and Shiny, and I have to get up early and take care of the kid and get him off to the nanny before I go to work. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been hanging out in chat. Really appreciate everyone's support and being a part of the show this evening. I've been averaging over 20 viewers like the entire evening, which is just awesome. So thanks so much for everybody hanging out. We have a number of new people who came and hung out and chat. So I love seeing new faces, and we appreciate the interaction. Thanks again, Shiny, for the donation. Crap, who was it that subbed? I apologize. Someone subbed. Thanks so much for the sub. And since there's still 15, 16 people hanging out, we should raid somebody. Because it's the right thing to do, and we're trying to pay it forward. Manage stream. This is how I do it because it's the only way I know how to do it. All right, so who should we raid? Is there anyone playing Star Citizen? Virity is playing Mafia. Marcus the Way is playing Star Citizen. We're going to raid Marcus the Way. All right. Thanks again so much. We appreciate you guys. Love all your faces. If you enjoy this conversation, you want to have more of it, come hang out in the Discord. And we will see you later. Nazeris, take us away.
All right. As we said, thank you everyone for watching. And as always, be kind. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks again, Shiny, for joining us.
No problem. I'm waving too. You can't see me.